The board is financially and legally responsible for the nonprofit. If the nonprofit gets sued, guess what? The board members are going to get sued. You're probably going to be named. A lot of times you're named in the lawsuit.
Hey everybody, it's Trevor Nelson with a friendly reminder to make sure that you subscribe, like, and hit that notification bell. We really hope you enjoyed the episode. Thanks so much. So I asked you a question recently and you hit me with a response and I was like, holy crud, holy smokes, Batman. We got to do a pod about this. And it was a simple question because we get a lot of questions. We get a lot of feedback after doing the pod and the webinars for 3 years plus now and hundreds of episodes and all that good stuff. I'm not bragging. I'm saying we get a lot of great feedback and we're thankful for the audience. So please, that's an encouragement, a nudge for everyone to keep it coming. One question that we read out loud, or I read out loud to you, is who is responsible for fundraising at a nonprofit? And you had a really particular answer, and you said, once you realize who's responsible, that's when you can do, and I want you to repeat for the audience what you told me.
Okay, well, the simple answer is, well, who's responsible? Well, the director of development. Let's just follow the chain. Well, okay, so the director of development is there. That's kind of the standard deal. That's who's out there for go raise money. But really, does that person report to? Well, they report to the executive director. So ultimately, the executive director is responsible for fundraising. Well, who does the director report to? The executive director. Mm-hmm. Report to the board. So the board is actually ultimately responsible. Now, if we go down through the staff, if we look at that from the, who works underneath, and I'm saying, we've just hit everybody for the majority of nonprofits, because most nonprofits don't have a staff more than 2 or 3 people, most. Yeah. But even if you do, it's still basically everybody is. Everybody within the organization, because you've got the people that are paid staff to do that, the director of development, the executive director. The board is fiducially responsible for the organization. Will you repeat that again for everyone that doesn't realize that? I think a lot of people I'll expand on it. The board is financially and legally responsible for the nonprofit. If the nonprofit gets sued, guess what? The board members are going to get sued. You're probably going to be named. A lot of times you're named in the lawsuit. Yep. Now, that's not to scare people. It's not. No, and that's why, that's why organizations always have E&O insurance and do things like that. But you'd be surprised. How many times somebody's on a board, and I did this survey. I'm going to do one tonight, work with a board. I'm going to ask the question, how many of y'all realize that you're financially responsible for this organization? It's a great question. And, there'll be a couple of hands. Sometimes everybody raises their hand. But a lot of times people are surprised. And they really, and it's not, because somebody was trying to, mislead them or anything else. It's just not ever come up. They never really thought that. Maybe they were on the committee. They got asked to be on the board. Maybe they got a Rolodex. Whatever reason that brought them onto the board, they don't understand that they're responsible for it. So everybody's responsible for fundraising. So that's where the whole topic comes in. So if everybody's responsible, then how do we get everybody engaged in fundraising? Well, you said another thing. I'm reverse engineering what you said about the development director reporting to the executive director, reporting to the board, the fiduciary responsibility of the board. You said something really, really impactful where you said, well, once you realize that chain, that's when you can get everyone on the same page. Well, that's when you have, once that happens, then you realize you have to get everybody on the same page. There you go. Yeah. Because once you get everybody on the same page, everybody starts pulling the same direction. There we go. You can start logging. Yeah. I mean, I use this example, and it's kind of from, drag inefficiency. It takes 4 times the effort to overcome, 4 people to overcome the effort of one person dragging. Yeah. It really does. And you think about, wow. Does even more so in nonprofits, I'm assuming. Well, I just think it's just kind of a factor in just the rule in life. I mean, if one person's dragging their feet and holding everybody back, it holds everyone back. So how do we get everybody on the same page? Well, you got to make it where everybody understands what they're doing. Yeah. Because we did an interesting, I'm interrupting you, I'm sorry. Yeah. We did an interesting case study in person at our boot camp that we did in 2023. Yeah. And we had 3 attendees, lovely organization and lovely people. I'll just preface it with that, by the way, not throwing them under the bus at all. I'm not going to name names.
But I remember you specifically telling me afterwards that you met with all three of them, and the answer as far as what they did and what their focus was and who was in charge of fundraising, all three answers were different.
Well, what we did was we said, okay, in 10 words or less, tell us what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we had everybody in the whole room do it.
Yeah.
There were 37 people in the room, 3 of them from the same organization. And I specifically asked them because I knew if they're from the same organization, they're going to give different answers. I just figured that would be the case. And it was 3 people. And these weren't just ordinarily 3 people. This was the executive director, the former president, and the current vice president of the organization. They all 3 gave completely different answers.
Yeah.
Wild. I mean, they were all in the same zip code, if you would, but they weren't the same. And I said, my comment to him was, to the room was, if 3 people at a very high level in the organization can't give the same answer, then how do you expect everybody else to? How do you expect the rest of the board, the volunteers, donors, staff, everybody else to? And the thing is, you can't.
Yeah.
So what's the fix for that?
And I bring that up not to get off topic, but I think that's really, really important, and it lends credibility to what we're talking about where the chain of fundraising starts and finishes and how everyone needs to be on the same page.
Yeah. Well, I think, number one, the executive director has got to be the executive director. I think sometimes in nonprofit fundraising, the executive director tends to hold back a little bit. Now, not always, and I don't mean this in a bad way. I'm just saying, they're for whatever reason, they don't want to try to tell the board too much about what to do. And the fact is they need to lead the board. The de facto leader of the board is the executive director. It is. How many times do you go to a board and you're sitting there as a board member and you're looking around and somebody asks a question and the first person everybody looks at, they look over at the executive director. Well, what's our policy on that? And the executive director gives the answer. And the reason is because that's the person that's in the middle of it every day. They're the executor. They're running. They're executing the business of the nonprofit. Okay, so that's what they're doing. So whenever they come and they go back to the board, and boards love this, when they go back to the board and say, "Hey guys, we want to tell you what we do," and what we do is we send kids with cancer to camp. And somebody goes, "Well, that is what we do." Well, I know. But we've got a mission statement. No, this isn't a mission statement. This is a marketing statement. This is how we introduce people. Somebody asks you, well, what do you do on the board? Oh, we send kids with cancer to camp every summer. Well, tell me more about that. And then that's an invitation to tell more about what your organization does. And there's not one single organization that can't do it. Every organization I've ever worked with, we were always able to get that statement down in less than 10 words. If you ask in our company at HGA, you said, if you ask anybody in our organization, what do you guys do? They'll say, we help nonprofits raise more money.
And if
regardless of what their job is, they'll say, we help nonprofits raise more money. And that's just a start. That's a start of a conversation because, I say that to somebody and somebody goes, oh, okay, nice. And they just keep going. Well, that's okay. It doesn't mean I'm going to have that. I don't have to give a presentation every time I meet somebody. But maybe I talk to somebody and they say, hey, Jason, what do you do? Well, I help nonprofits raise more money. Really? Well, how do you do that?
Yeah, far out, man.
And then we have a conversation. Oh, I work with a nonprofit, or I do that. So that's where all that is. It's building relationships. But what you're doing by having that is you're empowering all the people on your board, all the people on your staff, all your volunteers. You're empowering them to have that conversation with someone. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times they're not confident in how to do it because they're not doing it every day. They don't do it every day. So as soon as they leave the board meeting, they're going back to their lives, their spouse, their family, their work, their job, whatever it is they've got going on, because that's what their life is. And so when we do this, we empower them with some knowledge and confidence that they can give that answer. So what do you guys do? What do they do over at that nonprofit? Mm-hmm. Well, and maybe you're in a nonprofit where you do a multitude of things. You say, wow, we provide 37 different services across this spectrum. Okay, but we can still distill it down. We can still get that to that impact. And, maybe for you, for the nonprofit, maybe it's something that, you even tie in those 10 words right here in our community.
Yeah.
Right
absolutely.
here in our community, we help kids with cancer go to camp.
If you have the opportunity to do that, absolutely, you want to weave that in.
Well, that's where 99% of all nonprofit happens,
local.
is within in the local community. Even if it's a national organization, they typically drill it down for that area is what they're doing. And I just think that when you do that, you let everybody pull the rope the same way. Everybody's pulling the same direction. And
we're weaving a couple concepts in, which I love, actually, because we can't speak to the 10 words or less missions message, we call it, enough. And we started the conversation by talking about, once we know exactly the chain or who's responsible for fundraising, that's when we can get everyone on the same page. So there's a lot of symmetry here. I want to ask you a question about, or just like get your feedback and experience, because you've said this a bunch where, and I know a lot of executive directors listening to this, or anyone on a board listening to this, or vice versa, you always say that the board is there to support the executive director. But a lot of times the executive director feels like they're walking on eggshells. They don't want to lead or be that person to the board, or even ask for the kind of support that they necessitate, that they actually need.
They are. Well, the reality is the board's, the number one job for any board is to hire and fire the executive director, CEO, whatever you want to call him.
Sure.
And I think a lot of times people really, they take that and they think, well, this is my boss. I've got to really please them. I got to tell them what they want to hear. I got to make sure everything's good. No, that's not. What the executive director's job is to tell the truth and to tell everything that's going on, good, bad, or indifferent, to give that board the information so that way they can in turn support and help the executive director. Because if you're facing challenges, you need to tell, that you need to get the help, because then they can sit there and lean in. Because a lot of times when everything's really going smooth, and we all have these times where, in the nonprofit where everything's going really smooth and the board kind of gets sitting back in their chair and they're just going through, okay, we're approving the minutes and we're, here's, old business, new business, adjourn. Okay, let's go get a snack and a juice box and some cookies, and we'll call it a day.
Some orange slices.
Yeah. It's, but the reality is there's other times when that's not the case.
Yeah, you're talking about the no news is good news situation, which is not always great.
So what happens is, I think a lot of times executive directors they disable their board. They put them at a disadvantage where they can't help because they don't ask for help, or they ask for the wrong help. Hey, we need some ideas for, if that's what you need, sure. Because what happens is, and not giving the right expectation, because a board doesn't know. Half the time the board's trying to think up stuff for the executive director to go do in staff. Hey, wouldn't it be great if we did this? They're just trying to find work for them that they don't need to do.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think, the board is absolutely there to support the executive director in executing the business of the nonprofit. And maybe it's in oversight. Okay. Maybe that's what you're focusing on right now because you're going through your audit. Maybe it's in a new piece of the mission because you guys have a new piece of business that you're trying to work, or a new opportunity came in and you're saying, hey, does this work? Can we provide this service? Does this fit within what we do, or is it too far out? And you need some guidance and some people to be a part of that. The board has to have a vote on it. And it's because the bylaws are saying that before we do this, we've got to have the affirmation of the board. It may be the fact that we're $100,000 short. We need to go do a fundraiser, or, the elevator broke and we got to go fix it. And we don't have the money in the budget to do. What do? We got to do, we need to go raise some money. And I think whenever the board understands that, whenever they're given that information, I know in my experience as a board member, whenever I was given the information, I knew when to sit, don't underestimate your board. They're a lot smarter than sometimes we think, because they kind of know when to lean back in their chair and just kind of shake their head and have their cookie and drink their juice box and let everything go.
Yeah.
But, sometimes you got to shake them up a little bit and to get them leaning forward where they're going, okay, we got to go to work. Now this is what we're here for. They've called the fire alarm. We've got something going on. We need to get in here and get busy. Same thing in fundraising. When fundraisers come up, which you should always be fundraising, always be having that relationship, always be spreading the message, always putting that out there. But again, it's not their job full time. But if we
Yeah.
if we empower them in a way with information that they can do, then it does become something. Whenever the opportunity comes up and they see somebody that maybe would be a great board member, they find somebody that would be a great sponsor, somebody who maybe could use some of the services or something, and they have those words, that vernacular, that marketing message, if you would, to be able to start that conversation, it's so much easier.
Do me a favor. You've been on boards, you've witnessed boards, been on committees. Give folks a real life example when you saw an executive director, because you come in contact with so many locally in Oklahoma and then nationally now, coaching so many nonprofits. Give me an example of when you're going like, wow, that was really, really good. When you saw an executive director engage their board about a particular topic, or where you walked away going, they got that, they have it figured out. They know how to manage the board, but work with the board.
So I was on a board. The executive director left. We had an interim executive director, somebody who had done this. He was coming in for 6 months, maximum 6 months. The nonprofit had lost $500,000 in state funding. That was critical. The previous executive director had not been given them all that she sugarcoated way too much on the financials, what was going on, how they were doing revenue wise, and basically the nonprofit was going broke. And when this large funding disappeared, it really put us in dire straits. The acting executive director came in and said, in no uncertain terms, we are not going to let this happen. We are all going to come together. We're all going to lean in, and we're going to take care of this mission because the work is far too valuable. We're going to get all the stakeholders involved, and that means you, as board members, have to be on board. And it was really fascinating to watch because, I'm the bull in the china closet kind of board member. I just sit back and I'm either asleep or I'm standing up on the table saying, let's go. And so that's just,
shotgunning your juice box. You're shotgunning your juice box.
Yeah, I'm exactly. I'm trying to find what cookies over there and where the Oreos are.
Are those macadamia nuts?
Yeah, exactly.
That's great.
And so whenever he did that, he got everybody's attention. Now, everybody cared about the board. The board was great. Everybody really cared about the mission. Everybody was sold out for it, and everybody wanted to help. But this was a point where he said, we cannot waste any time. We can't sit here and take inaction and go, well, let's all put it off. This is the time we've got to step forward. And he got everybody leaning forward, leaning in, not worried about cookies and juice boxes, but realizing that we've got to make some decisions and we've got to make them quick. And that's really all he did was said, awesome. We're not going to let this happen. We're going to do it. And everybody was ready to lean in. They were all ready. He's one of the sharpest guys I've ever been around when it comes to this stuff, because I went with him and we traveled quite a bit together and going and meeting with the different stakeholders. And, I'm the bull in the china. So he harnessed the bull is what he did. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. He used that energy and
speedboat and the rudder.
I was a speedboat without a rudder. Well, he put a rudder on me and we were able to churn. Awesome. He was the rudder. And that's where I think executive directors sometimes miss out on awesome opportunities because the board's waiting for you to say something.
Yes.
And if you don't say something, there will be somebody who will. So it goes back to the whole thing of, nature abhors a vacuum. So if you're not going to lead, somebody else will. You've got that board member that won't shut up, the bull in the china closet, I guess that's me, stand up on the table, wants to take off and go, run around, do something. You've got to have that. You've got to be willing to say, and it may feel like a risk, but I can assure you it's riskier the other way. There's risk, but it's not risky.
Yeah. I think so many people, and I know you know this already, but I think so many people listening, I think so many people in that role could use that encouragement and reminder that they need to have that engaging conversation with the board. And
well, if I could add something,
it can be intimidating.
And if I could add something, and if you are feeling that way and you're feeling intimidated because maybe you've got some stuff that's not going to be fun.
Maybe you're a first time ED. Maybe you're facing a wall. Yeah.
What's the most? I had a friend of mine tell me this. One of my best friends tell me this years ago, and I said, what do you think the secret to business is? And he said, tell the truth when you least want to.
You've told me that. Yep. You
He
don't have
said,
to worry
tell
about
the
it.
truth when you least want to.
Yeah.
He goes, because if you don't, it's not going to get better. But
Good
if you
call.
do, it typically won't get any worse.
Yeah,
but
rip
it
the
just
Band-Aid off.
continues. Yeah, rip the Band-Aid off and get after it. But here's something that you can do, because if you are feeling, and this is what I've seen, okay, this is how I've seen it done. And when you have that, is you've got to go get some allies for you, because sometimes boards can be a little disjointed. Maybe there's a little, you've got some sides that want to go one way and the other side wants to go the other way,
Yeah.
a little polarized maybe. But you've got typically there's a couple of key players on the board who have sway with the entire group. Maybe it's your president, maybe it's just somebody who's very respected. And you go get them and you just say, look, I've got to bring this up to the board. Do you have any suggestions? And we need to talk about this. And I'd like to have some counsel. And don't just get one, try to go get 2 or 3 together to do it with. Because if you just get one, sometimes you put them in a bad place, because then they're out on they can get dropped out on an island real quick too. And so, but if you go get 2 or 3 people that you know that you can talk to, go tell them the situation, help get that information out there about what you're going to do and how you're going to share it. And that way the executive director has courage and is encouraged. You as an executive director have that, knowing that you've already talked this through. Some of the hard stuff has already been dealt with, as far as how you're going to respond, because they're going to ask you questions that may be uncomfortable that you've got to answer, but then you'll have the answer to it when you address the entire board. And that's just one example, but maybe it's trying to get but I like doing that with everything.
That's a good share.
Maybe it's the executive team that you've got to go talk to, maybe going and getting your president, vice president, and maybe you've got an employee issue you've got to talk to. Maybe it's you got to go raise $100,000 for the elevator, and I don't know what we're going to do. Well, go get, you've got all that's what they're there for. They're there to shore you up but sometimes going and, getting 2 or 3 people together and getting some consensus there, then you can take it to the bigger body of the board and have a lot better deal. Now you want to do everything within the bylaws, and I don't know,
yeah, totally. You're not talking about, you're talking about a way to galvanize people. I think that's what that's the experience there.
If you and I have a conversation, because I know that I can get some time with you because we got the board, because you can't get it because that's what you have a board meeting for. But look, I'm really I've got to bring this up to the board. I need to talk to them. We got to raise $100,000 for the elevator, and I don't really know what to do. Maybe we could talk about it now. That way I can kind of have some idea before I go present to the board, because I'd like to have at least a couple of ideas. I don't want to come up there with no answers. I'd like to at least or have some ideas. And so that's how you can leverage your board and board members to help get things done, to get their buy-in.
I'm gonna encourage everyone, if you're facing this kind of stuff with your committee for an event, with your board. Jason's met with hundreds, if not thousands, approaching 1,000 nonprofits about free coaching. Oh, wow, look at that. Wow, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can just QR code technology. Where'd you get that from? That hasn't hit California yet. That must be moving its way west.
Anyway, you're in Oklahoma.
Whoa, thanks, man. But if you're just listening to this on Apple or Spotify, do us a favor. Go to hjafundraising.com. Click on the free coaching, which should be in the resources tab, if memory serves. But anyway, very easy to reach us and schedule some time with Jay. You can also just email him directly. I'm going to go ahead and put your biz in the street, brother. Jason@hgafundraising.com. But no matter what, our time's free. We're here for you. We're happy to spend a half hour to an hour with you just to talk about these kinds of things, anything under the sun. And just to appreciate it, man. Awesome experience share there. And I hope everyone got a lot of value out of that. And we will see you all next time. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day wherever you're at.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you love our podcast, click the download button, rate us, and follow us on social media at HGA Fundraising. Get out there, start fundraising, and raise more money. See you next time.